Alright, so in the last video we made jerky. Now we're going to get started on some biltong. Um, Basically the first thing you're going to do when you're making biltong is toast some coriander seeds, so we'll jump right into that. And the recipe is down in the description, and that recipe is for a 4-pound batch of biltong. So make sure you adjust it accordingly if you're doing a 2-pound or 8-pound or whatever size batch. The first step in making biltong is going to be to toast some coriander seeds. So got some coriander seeds. You get this at the grocery store. I bought a huge bag from Amazon, but I'm just going to put this on medium heat, toss it around until the seeds darken. Maybe they'll start making some crackly noises. I'm going to do this dry pan, no oil, and just let them heat up nice. Okay, so we're about 10 minutes in. Coriander's getting darker. I can definitely smell it. I think we're about ready to take this off the heat. Okay, once you got your coriander all toasted, let it cool down. I put it in here in my mortar, and I added the peppercorns in there as well from the recipe. I got my salt handy. I'm gonna add that in after I'm done grinding it. If you have a spice grinder, that's going to be a lot more effective than this, a lot easier. But this is what I have handy, so I'm going to do it manually. I'm not going to make you watch. This is a lot of work, so much better if you have an actual spice grinder. All right, so we're all ground up here. Take my salt, toss it in there. Give it a swirl just to mix it all up. So cleanliness is a little bit more important here than it was with the jerky because we're not going to be applying a lot of heat to this. So you want to make sure using gloves or super clean hands. Grab your eye round, and we're going to cut this into 4 1-inch thick slabs. So just like before, I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. Next thing we're going to do, pour some cider vinegar on there. Make sure you get a nice even coating. The amount is in the description. For this is about 2 pounds of, or sorry, this is about 4 pounds of beef. We're going to use 5 tablespoons. Just make sure that it's coated evenly everywhere. Make sure you get the ends. And then we're ready to put our dry spices on there. Sprinkle it on top. Rub it in good. Again, make sure you get the sides, the ends, everything. This is all part of what is going to help to cure the meat. This recipe is very simple. Definitely you can go a lot more complex with it, adding, sugar or other spices. Once you've got a nice even coating everywhere, this will go in the fridge for 24 hours. We'll see you then. All right, so our beef's been in the fridge overnight, 24 hours I did. Flipped it, made sure that there's good coverage every few hours. Now I'm gonna just pop it in here. There are lots of videos I'm sure you can find on how to build a biltong box. Otherwise you can get stainless steel hooks and just hang your biltong. That's that's sort of traditionally how it's done. Hang it somewhere where it's got some airflow. A Biltong box is just a box that has a fan and allows room temperature air through it. This actually can run room temperature air. I just set the temperature to 70 degrees so the heater doesn't activate at all. So I have one device that will do both jerky and biltong. So the dehydrator came with these sort of mesh screens. That works great for jerky, but for biltong I wanted something a little different. So at the grocery store I got these little 10 by 10 cookie cooling racks. They have these feet that are a little inconvenient, but ultimately this is exactly the same size as that and will fit right into the dehydrator. So I'm gonna just set that on there and put this right inside. Now I'm gonna turn on the dehydrator. 24 hours, temperature is already set to 70 Fahrenheit. I did that before the video. And so it's just gonna flow air across it. One thing about this dehydrator in particular is that the longest period of time you can set it for is 24 hours. This process, because you're not using any heat, is gonna take up to a week, maybe even a little more. Basically, you're gonna dry it until when you pinch that piece at its thickest point, it doesn't really have any give. It's gonna be like really hard to get it to squish. So that can take quite some time. So you're gonna have to come and adjust that timer once a day just to make sure that it continues to run. All right, guys, the day is finally here. We're gonna take the biltong out of the machine. It is dry, I've tested it, I've tasted it. It's good to go. I'm gonna pop this right out. That's a nice hard slabs of biltong. You're gonna slice this nice and thin as compared to your jerky. That's just traditionally how it's done, and it's gonna have a much different texture than the jerky. So that's sort of the big draw of biltong, is this much sort of lighter, easier to chew kind of texture. Also, the flavor is a lot more mild. So I'll go through that. We'll do some kind of close-ups here of how to slice this. I suggest that if you're going to make any volume of biltong, that you invest in a biltong slicer. So this is a pretty cheap one off of Amazon, and I really didn't think I was gonna need it. But cutting through this stuff, even with a nice sharp knife, is pretty difficult, and you run a risk of cutting yourself. Whereas the biltong slicer is just like paper slicer at your office. You just drop it down and then advance it a little bit, drop it down again, and again, we'll do some nice close-up work here in just a second. All right, so we're gonna slice right into this. See, just kind of advance it in, drop the blade down, advance it a little further, drop the blade down. And you're gonna end up with these nice thin slices as compared to our jerky. Much thicker, you can see. When you're tasting this, if you're gonna taste these side by side, I suggest you do the biltong first. It's a much more subtle flavor. Not that it's not, not that there's not a lot of flavor. It's just a lot more subtle than this recipe for jerky, which is kind of a palate killer, honestly. There are no suggested wine pairings, in other words, for that jerky recipe, whereas this biltong actually could reasonably find itself on a charcuterie board. It has a nice mild flavor that would, go well alongside salamis and cheeses and things like that. So go ahead and give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Have a good one.